Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter. If you haven't already, you can find that on freightwaves.com/checkcall. Today, we welcome Paul Singer, co-founder and CEO at FleetWaves. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you for having me, Mary.
I am excited for today. This is something we've kind of been touching on here and there throughout this, and that is ultimately, how AI is being applied throughout the freight broker and 3PL space, because it's a much different application than your trucking or your temperature controlled freight. But before we get too far into that, let's get some background on you and kind of why you started FleetWaves.
For sure. Yeah. I think I probably have one of the least straightforward routes to freight I've personally seen. I'd love for someone to find a weirder one. So I started my career. So I went to Yale, and like any good Yalie, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do because we don't really learn we don't actually learn like practical things in school. So I went to management consulting because I'm like, let me just punt this decision for another like 2 years. Really kind of fell in love with our industrials practice at LEK. And one of my first cases was on industrial metal doors. Turns out industrial metal doors has like a lot of drama going on. There's like 3 different companies. But one of the biggest markets or like sub-markets of metal doors are warehouses, right? And I was like, oh, like that's weird. I grew up in the suburbs. Like I don't think I've ever seen like these like mega warehouses. I think at this point I've probably seen hundreds. And I was like, that's kind of crazy. Like let me dig into this a little bit more, and started to learn a little bit more about logistics and just how big this was. And this was back when I was 22. And then the LEK partners were sort of working on some sort of thought pieces and white papers on kind of where the industry was headed. Uber Freight had sort of just launched publicly, and I was between projects, and so they said, "Hey, Paul, come help us write this white paper." And that sort of was like the final nail in this coffin of me getting super excited about the space. Ultimately, ended up getting a job at Uber Freight because I helped write that white paper. So I started on the operations and strategy team. Ultimately, ended up building a lot of the products at Uber Freight that small carriers are using day in, day out. So really proud of the work that we did there, and we can kind of get into how that led to FleetWaves. But I left Uber Freight about 2.5 years ago just because ChatGPT had just come out, which is crazy that in only 2.5 years, like you had ChatGPT, which was basically like a toy at the time. You could like tell it to like give you a joke. Like it was basically like a slightly better Alexa or Siri, right? But like clearly there was something there. And so got together with my co-founder Kwong and started exploring, hey, where are large language models, where is generative AI going to have an impact in logistics and freight and brokering freight. We spent a lot of time playing around with different ideas. And all the while that this technology is sort of getting better and better as we're playing around with it. And so the story, and this is just 100% true. I remembered at Uber, we built this great app and this web portal where carriers could come and click a button and book, but there were still lots of carriers calling Uber, doing a little bit of negotiating, wanted to like understand a little bit more about the loads. And so they would call in, and we had huge teams dedicated to taking these inbound calls. And I thought, hey, voice AI had just become possible to build. This was probably 1.5 years ago. And so I said, hey, what if we built like this really janky voice AI product? Like let's time box it to 2 weeks of work, and let's see what we can do in 2 weeks. We found a load board that did like absolutely no fraud checks, no compliance checks, no like KYC. And we just signed up for this random tiny little load board, and we posted 2 fake loads. We said, hey, we're going to post 2 fake loads for 1 day, and let's see, like a carrier might call on this load, and let's see what happens. Those 2 loads generated 3 calls, and the product was horrible. Like I will be the first one to say that it was terrible. Like the voice was super robotic. The lag was terrible. The AI was like very inflexible. Like it wasn't able to take context from all these different places. It was literally the worst possible thing we could have built. And those 3 calls went like pretty well. One of the carriers didn't even know, clearly when we listened to the call, one of the carriers clearly didn't know they were talking to AI. And so we realized, wow, like we've built literally the worst possible thing we could have done, and it works. It's working. And in startup world, that is like magic fairy dust when you can build the worst thing and you kind of feel that pull of product market fit. So we spent a lot more time really like improving everything about it. And long story short, today we're working with many of the top 100 brokers. We've expanded our communication channel modality, so we're on email, we're on phone, we're on Slack, we're on Teams. We live like kind of in their TMSs, and our AI is handling over 50,000 conversations every single day across our network, right? So, which today means that our AI is pushing 100 years of carrier sales experience across all of our customers. So feedback from our customers has just been super positive. I mean, carriers love it because they're no longer waiting on hold. They get the information quickly. Brokers love it. We're negotiating better rates for them. We've now expanded to track and trace, which is actually, despite being more back office, is actually way harder than doing carrier sales. There's so much more logic and complexity there. So we're seeing that we're sort of becoming the default choice as brokers are thinking, hey, like where can I apply AI in my business? Where's like the right mix of like high impact and speed to value? And we're always in that conversation, which is great. I mean, I think we've developed just really awesome relationships with folks, and our customers continue to advocate for us. So that's the story about us. The really kind of amazing small but mighty team. I do love to say that everyone on the tech team is a former founder themselves, and then everyone on the business side comes from Freight. So we really do try to marry those two things really well, and that's the pretty long version of the founding story.
I like it though. I mean, you brought up the most important part, which is even if the first product is absolute garbage, you have something. You got it working. It's functional. You can only go up, because otherwise you'll sit there just spinning your wheels, going, "Oh well, it should be this. It should be this." Like, I don't know if it'll work, and you just sit there spinning your wheels. When in reality, you're like, "Oh no, we have this product. It's not great, but it works." And that's where you're just like, "Okay, we can make it better from here."
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And also really just, a shout out to some of our earliest customers, Dave Stone at Ryder, Brandon Bay at LGI, Dan Mansham at Ally, John Ackerman, Sean Fahey, John Evans at Capstone, Mike Core at Capstone. Those guys took a risk on us when our product was better than what it was when we did those 3 calls, but certainly not at the level it was today. So, and it still feels like every time you work with a customer, it really does feel like this partnership of them, because our underlying tech and what we're building is just improving so rapidly. I think our customers invest in us and realize that Fleetworks is kind of there's impact today, but there's also, hey, there's like this art of the possible. Like, what can we do for you 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 12 months from now? And it's about finding like the right folks who want to go on that journey together.
So I guess when it comes to starting that journey, what are some things that you guys are most commonly seeing kind of being easily integrated into an AI situation? I know you mentioned earlier you have carrier sales and some of those back office track and trace. Is that kind of the first line off the mark that you're seeing, or is that kind of after maybe they've done a huge AI integration into their TMS? This is something that they bring in at the end.
It's a good question. So I think the really powerful thing about AI platforms, and we've made this very conscious choice from the very beginning, is we typically really only work with pretty large brokerages. And like we'll flex for kind of the right people, but largely high growth, really tech forward, and typically pretty substantial brokers. I think because we come from the industry, we realize that I think integrations are a super dirty word in this industry. And, I was talking with some folks about this. I think one of the tough things that we actually sell against is how terrible all the historical vendors in freight have been. Like, I think there are so many people who promise the world, and then when it comes time to integration, the product just really falls flat. The integration is super painful. It's many months. It's super expensive, and you never really feel the value. Um, so we realized all of that pretty quickly. So our kind of pillars of how we work with customers. First of all, we're very UI agnostic, and so what that means is our customers have invested a huge amount of time in developing their own platforms, whether it be like bolting things onto their own TMS or building their own TMS in house and integrating everything in there. And we really love that. And I think the cool thing about AI agents is that you don't need a new UI to be able to see like huge impact. Like our AI is almost like an infinite ghost operator that lives across all of your systems. So that's really important to us. Is that our customers can continue to invest in the products that they have built over the last could be decades, right? The other piece is that is speed to value, right? So usually like when I mention integration, people get scared, people like tense up a little bit, and our record for an integration from initial contract to go live was 22 hours. And so we're hopefully with a customer right now that should get ahead of that. So we'll see if we can get under 20. So speed to value for us is just critical. And so I think we like to show customers, hey, you can take it piecemeal. And then ultimately, just to kind of round it out, I think what we really understand about this space is that, hey, we have like the best technology in our vertical, but then you really need to fit that tech into the process and change management of our customer. And this is the super sexy part of selling tech, right? As you talk about change management. But if you're a large broker, like, your impact lives and dies by how you implement the technology that you're purchasing, right? So we spent a lot of time with customers, and we've architected everything from the ground up to just almost slide in super seamlessly to how brokers work. And what we consistently hear is people are just shocked by how easy it is to implement. And it's not every AI vendor is like that. There's a lot of like little things that we've done behind the scenes, like how we have architected our APIs to mold to every TMS's potential like API landscape, that lets us just go to a really large broker, like someone who's doing 1,000 loads a day, and just say like, yeah, like if you sign with us on Monday, on Friday we're going to be covering your freight. And that's a claim that we stand behind. We're happy to like offer huge refunds to customers if we don't do that. We've so far had 100% success rate on our promises.
I mean, that's a bold statement. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is, to just say like, no, we can make this happen. We promise. But when it comes to that, that's something you touched on a little bit, the fact that in the transportation space and supply chain, historically, it hasn't been the partnership between a brokerage and 3PL and their tech provider hasn't always been positive. I have personally filled out a ticket for something not working and said, hey, I physically can't do my job because of this system that is no longer working. And they say, great, we'll get back to your ticket in 36 to 48 hours. And we'll look at it there. And it's like, that's not really doable because I'm like, my operations are stopped because of this thing. And they're just like, well, we'll get to it when we get to it. Like, you're not big enough for us to care. And I'm like, cool. So I guess I'm just gonna sit here. But also, you want someone, but there are some brokerages that's what they want. They don't want someone that's gonna jump. Like, they only want someone when something's wrong. They don't necessarily want someone checking in and all of that. And every different freight brokerage or agent or any 3PL, they all kind of have those different needs. So when it comes to that, there are all these different AI vendors in the marketplace, which is great. We love that. But at the same time, there's so many. If I am looking at, I want to try to automate some things and maybe get some AI introduced, and, track and trace seems like a great fit for us to start internally as a company. We've figured out that's where we can kind of accept any downtime or accept any kind of hiccups that should they happen versus something else. How do I even know where to start when it comes to vetting these vendors. What are things that I need to think about? Is it the same kind of process that I would for any kind of tech vendor, like a TMS provider, where they need to be a true partner? They need to kind of align with what I want, or is there more to consider?
Yeah, I think one of the really how we've kind of oriented ourselves is first of all, I think just spending a lot of time like understanding what that customer actually needs, right? So whether it be track and trace or whether it be, hey, we're going to handle your inbound calls, or we're going to help you cover calls using or freight using outbound calls, right? Or outbound emails. So there's really we spend a lot of time understanding with customers where they're going to feel value. And then it's really about the speed to value. I think the best way to vet these guys, and it's pretty, I think that it's just the easiest way to do it is number one, just talk to their current customers, right? And maybe not like their first customers, because I think those customers maybe got the red carpet treatment, but maybe the customers that came on say, hey, who did you onboard in the last month? And connect me with them, right? Or even let me just send like a few questions to that person. So we spent a lot of time with our current customer success, and that just catapults us to kind of the next one. I think for some of our larger customers, they have the infrastructure to be able to compare multiple vendors head to head. And it's not as hard as you think. And look, I mean, given the dollar impact, it really could be worth it. And so, I think what we see customers using us to compare is, things like hallucination rate, like how often is the AI screwing up and like making shit up, right? We spend a lot of time building and like part of our kind of secret sauce is basically bringing hallucination really as close to zero as possible. I think what we found is we've seen a very wide range of vendors, and people talk the talk, but we've seen a lot of folks switch to us when they realize that, hey, like it turns out the other vendors actually just aren't offering the service that they promise, right? So we're kind of back to that problem of like vendors over promising and then people feeling burnt by that. But I think going head to head is great. You should measure hallucination rate. You should measure carrier feedback. You should measure your own internal operator feedback. You should measure margin improvements. So, for example, we have a lot of really sophisticated tactics and tricks on how our AI negotiates. And so, if FleetWorks is actually negotiating $5 better on average than a competing product, well, actually, even if the competing product was free, it would be a horrible deal for you to buy, right? And we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we create a product that's so good that even if our competitors are offering it for free, it'd be a very silly decision for you to purchase them. And we're actually already seeing that. We've done head to heads against a couple companies. We've seen a mix of companies either pulling out of the head-to-head because it's just not worth their time anymore, or those customers just killing the other pilot and going with us. So we're really do encourage folks to go head-to-head because we spent a lot of time building a product that we're just super proud of, and we feel like we have the experience to actually deliver some super quick and massive impact to our customers.
I also have long since said that once, if you're in the process of talking to a new supplier, whether it's something down to toilet paper in the office or something as big as your day-to-day TMS or warehouse management system, it's really important that if you are coming across these suppliers and asking them questions and you're not sure if they're just, telling you what you want to hear or not, if anyone is hesitant to give you a reference of one of their existing customers, like, obviously, they're probably gonna pick the customer that they're not on bad terms with, that they're not like, no one's gonna pick the customer that they're having beef with. They're just not gonna do that. But still, if someone is hesitant to give you a customer referral or let you talk to anyone else that's been a customer, to me, that's almost like a bigger red flag than if they had just told me what I wanted to hear, you know?
Totally. Yeah. And again, I think, it's a small industry. I think people know, like some people tend to be very like big advocates for one company or another, and I think that's great. Like that we've stood on the shoulders of some incredible folks who've been really big advocates for us. But I would say like talk to the folks who are not like the big LinkedIn personalities, right? Because those are the folks who I think they have nothing to gain or lose by providing honest feedback.
So we have a little bit of time left. So before we get to our favorite question, that's our final question of the day. If you have a crystal ball over there, let's shine it up, get it ready to roll. What do you think the next 12 months will kind of look like for AI and freight? Because I mean, we have a lot of players seemingly entering the market. And so over the next year, I think we might see kind of the cream of the crop, they'll rise up and then the other ones will kind of maybe morph into something else, like what we saw with visibility. But what kind of trends and predictions are you keeping your eye on to kind of keep you guys at the forefront?
Yeah. So I think from a business perspective, you're totally right. I think we will see I think I like to tell people we're kind of in the third inning of AI. So we've gone pretty quick. Like visibility, I think it took maybe a couple of years to get there. I think for AI, it took less than a year. It took like 6 to 9 months. So I think we're starting to see people doing head-to-heads. I think we're going to start to see some case studies come out of real comparisons between these companies. And, we've already seen companies like drop out and, move to something different. I think we'll see vendors start to pick a lane a little bit more. This is maybe my controversial take, is I think there's a lot of folks who want to be everything to everyone. And I don't think that, I think that because of how easy this tech is to implement, I think it behooves people to specialize a little bit more. I think you can kind of go best in class or like best in suite. And I think if you can support it organizationally, you should go best in class. That is like from a business side. From a tech side, man, the underlying technology is just getting so much better. What I'm really excited about personally is the improvement in reasoning models. So it kind of made news like outside of AI, DeepSeek coming out a few months ago, and everyone being like, "Oh, the cost of this is going to zero." And there was nothing actually like particularly ground. I think if you've been in AI, like DeepSeek was really just following the trend, so there wasn't a huge amount of surprise there, for us. But what I'm really excited about is models like DeepSeek R1, OpenAI's O1, or like some of their upcoming models like O4 that enable really like smart and sophisticated AI reasoning. Because today I think AI can be a little stupid, and we do a lot of engineering to make it less stupid. But you can, for phone calls and things like that, I think you want those stupid models that can move really quickly and be super performant. But we're starting to get to a world where customers are trusting us where to have like AI like live alongside their operators and their TMS and like make decisions about what actions to take. That is a really great application for reasoning models. Now, the downside of reasoning models are that they tend to be a lot more expensive, and they tend to be a lot slower. But we see costs coming down, we see performance improving, and so you can probably start to use reasoning models in. I don't think anyone's really using reasoning models yet, but you can start to use reasoning models to do some really interesting stuff, like on track and trace, for example. Like a human operator it's actually very easy for a human to understand, should I call this carrier and ask for an update? It's actually really hard for AI or automation to be able to do that. And we've seen, particularly like I think less careful AI companies just spam calling carriers, and it's a horrible experience for them. It's terrible, right? We don't want to do that. So you can use reasoning models to say like this carrier, a reasoning model can look at a map, for example, and say, okay, this carrier is, in Elk Grove, Illinois, right? And they need to be in Chicago in 1 hour. And based on how their GPS coordinates are moving, it looks like everything is on track. So I actually don't even need to call this carrier, right? Versus, hey, this carrier, is in Columbus and they need to be in Chicago in 3 hours. Definitely give this carrier a call, right? Or like, hey, we just called this carrier 30 minutes ago and the next check time is set for 5 minutes from now, well, as a human, I probably wouldn't call that carrier because it's like, oh, maybe you would, but I probably don't need to because like we just spoke with them half an hour ago. But you can add another element of like, well, they're actually at the facility and they've been at the facility for 4 hours. So maybe I do need to call the carrier, right? So there's all these like inputs that you could do. Simpler models are really bad at making that decision. I think reasoning models can be pretty good at it. So that's I think that's something that we will see coming down the pipeline over the next 6 months. You know, again, 2.5 years ago, ChatGPT just came out, right? So the growth and improvement of what these things can do is really, really rapid. And we're just excited to work with folks to figure out how to drive impact for their business.
I mean, I'm excited. Those are some pretty big developments coming pretty quickly. I'm excited to see how they'll kind of play into things, into existing implementations and then also future ones. That does bring us to our final question of the day. And Paul, we're knocking people out with this one. So if you could build a house out of any food, what would you choose?
It's got to be gummy candy. I'm such a gummy sour candy addict. To the point where I just can't even buy it anymore because if I do, it's just gone. It would be a terrible house. It would melt under the sun. It would have no structural stability, but I would be very happy for a solid week. And then I'd be homeless.
I mean, look, Willy Wonka had a candy factory, and that was impractical, but like you can have a gummy house. I think that sounds like the best house in the world. And I would love that immediately. I would find a way to make that happen. Sun be danged.
All right. Post Gleeworks, let's figure it out.
Exactly. All right, Paul. So if anyone has any questions on maybe the best gummy candy to use for structural stability, or if they have any questions on kind of how to get started in the AI space, where can they find you outside the show?
You can come to our office in San Francisco. We love hosting people. But if you don't want to come out here, you can always reach me at my email, which is paul@fleetworks.ai, or drop me a DM on LinkedIn. We're always super responsive there.
Awesome. You heard it. Paul will take in-person DMs and virtual DMs. I don't know that in-person DMs are I think that's just a drop-in. I think that's just a Popeye.
Handing a mail to someone. I don't know. Handing a letter. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
You can find Check Call the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows. Don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.